Imagine if you could easily find solutions to make your region or city smarter, greener, better connected, more social, and closer to citizens. The Interreg Europe Policy Learning Platform can help you access knowledge about the latest policy trends, discover expert-validated good practices from all over Europe, find solutions in our peer review, get tailored support from our expert team. We can connect you with the right people and organizations. Together, we will find ways to solve your region's or city's challenges. Start your policy learning journey today.
All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to all. We are very happy to be here with you this afternoon to talk about a very interesting topic today and very important for European policymakers. We are going to look at the role of hackathon and challenge prizes for innovation policies. So I'm Arnault Morisson. I'm one of the thematic experts in research and innovation at the Policy Learning Platform. And today we are going to co-moderate this webinar with Marc Pattinson, who is going to join us very soon. And we also have Lotte with us. If you have any technical issues regarding Zoom, so good to have you with us, Lotte. And today we are going to have three very interesting presentations from three excellent speakers looking at three different types of challenge prizes. So we are going to look at the Amsterdam Startup Residence Program to connect startups to urban challenges, kind of these mini missions, and is going to be presented by Luís. Luís, good to have you with us. We are also going to look at hackathons to solve urban challenges in Sofia, and it's going to be presented by Sevdalina from Bulgaria. Good to have you with us as well. And last but not least, we are going to look at the Donostia Innovation Challenge from the Basque country, presented by Aritz, and good to have you with us as well. So please, participants, do not hesitate at any point to use the chat, ask questions. The goal of this webinar is to make it as interactive as possible. So before we move on to speakers and our three presentations, a few words about Interreg Europe. Interreg Europe is a very unique program that aims to favor interregional collaboration through better policies. It's a very unique program because it involves all European regions, all European countries, using a combinations of projects and funding and services. So in a nutshell, what is Interreg Europe? It's really a capacity building program for regional policymakers to design better policies. And it does that through the exchange of experience and good practices. And there are two main actions. One is through the projects where policymakers exchange and collaborated on a specific topic. And today we have two different projects with us, INNOBRIDGE and Urban M. So INNOBRIDGE is more about this university industry collaboration, and Urban M is about policies regarding fab labs and maker spaces, or to make things within cities. And the second action of the Interreg Europe, the second pillar, is really the policy learning platform. And what we do at the policy learning platform is really capitalizing from all the knowledge from Interreg Europe projects and try to diffuse it to many regional policy makers for them to design better innovation policies and policies in general. What about the platform? In a nutshell, what we do, so it's really all about capacity building, and we do that through the exchange of knowledge, to the access of people, and through expert support. And through access to knowledge, what we do, you have this database of all the good practices from Interreg Europe project, but also from beyond. And we recommend you to have a look at the good practice database, so to inspire you in your policy and your policy design. And we also write a different type of policy brief, news and publications. And our last policy brief was on innovation procurement. And right now with Marc, we are writing a very interesting policy brief on regional missions. So closely linked to what we are going to talk today. We also provide access to people. So we have a community of more than 25,000 practitioners that you can have access to on the website. And we also provide some event and networking and policy learning events. And our next event is going to be in Ghent, in Belgium, in a few weeks, and we are going to talk about spaces for innovation. So a very interesting topic as well. We also provide some specific services, and we provide some peer reviews and matchmaking services. So here, the services are really to address and to help policymakers solve their policy challenges. And Sevdalina, we are going to talk a little bit with you because you've been involved in one of our latest peer review, which was held in Central Macedonia, in Thessaloniki, regarding the design of open innovation calls. So you're going to explain a little bit, but before we are going to introduce the topic of today's webinar. So today's webinar is about hackathons and challenge prizes. And before we move on to presentation, let's say what are very briefly hackathon and challenge prizes. So hackathon is usually a few days, and endorsement prizes are usually longer time. And they are very flexible policy tools, and they are very flexible in that they can engage a very broad audience and diverse group of actors and sponsors to deliver solutions to challenges thanks to its low barriers of entry. And the main objectives of those innovation endorsement prizes are to reorient research efforts and to incentivize the creation of a desired technology. So what is interesting with these policy tools is, one, it's super flexible. Second one, it can engage a very broad range of people because it has such a low barriers of entry. And then it can start engaging into a process of delivering new desired technology. And more recently, what we have seen is that those endorsement prizes and hackathons, they are like shifting a little bit to address and to solve more like regional societal challenges and more like place-based challenges. And we are going to see that with Sevdalina, Luís, and Aritz that are very addressing those type of specific challenges in the local context. So what can regional policymakers, what they must do when they design such hackathon and endorsement prizes? First, they have to identify what are the regional societal challenges that they want to address. They have to attract the competent solvers, and they have to answer specific questions regarding, the co-sponsors, the participants, the competition rules, the intellectual property rights, the type of awards and criteria, or to engage public, or to market and brand these type of competitions. And it has to be within part of a broader regional policy mix and follow-up activities. But before we move on to our presentation, this is some of the knowledge and events that we have organized at the Policy Learning Platform. You can see like some good practices that we have regarding open innovation challenges. This one is from Lazio, where they try to support cooperation between big corporations and startups, but also like this type of prize to incentivize people to use electric vehicles. And this was in Azores. We did a peer review that we are going to talk a little bit about it. And we wrote like this very nice policy brief on innovation procurement. So we recommend you to have a look at it. And the peer review, we organized a very interesting peer review that was last month, and maybe Sevdalina, you can tell us a little bit about your experience, because you were a peer at this peer review, and we can see the photo here when we can see you as well. So a few words about your experience as a peer during this peer review. How was it for you, and how was the experience? And
it was my first peer review, and it was excellent. Actually, it raised the standard so high that I can only imagine what other peer reviews would look like. Thanks to the organizers and the region of Thessaloniki. I saw that Stavros is participating in this webinar. So Stavros, you did great job, because by setting the brief and by organizing it, you actually really led us with the assistance of Marc and Arnault to what you wanted to learn from us. And it was a very good group of peers, all of them bringing different perspectives. So this was what, 2.5 days of really intense, in-depth, getting to know the region, its players, its actors, the whole innovation ecosystem, and real collaborative effort to discover what may work and what and what are the preconditions. I really truly hope, having read the report, that it's useful for the region. But on our side, I can say that it was absolutely useful experience for Sofia, because most of the regions actually face quite similar challenges. So having to think them over and with others and talking out loud about options actually helped not just the region of Thessaloniki, but also all the regions where the peers came from. I very much recommend this as a tool, and I'm planning to encourage my region to use it as well.
Excellent, great to hear. Thank you, Sevdalina. And indeed, this peer review was very similar to the topic that we are discussing today. It was about this design on open innovation calls and how to favor this multi-level coordination with other national level innovation calls. So that was very interesting 2 days together, learning first from the regions, learning from the peers, and then giving some concrete policy recommendations to the regions on how to design such open innovation calls. So now we can move on to our presentations, and our first presentation is going to be you, Luís, talking about Amsterdam and mini missions and what they are doing regarding this type of challenge prices. The floor is yours, and you have 10 minutes. And please, participants, if you have any questions, please use the chat to ask your question. Please, Luís, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Arnaud. I trust that everybody can listen to me. Nice. Well, thank you very much, first and foremost, for the invitation. It's an honor and a privilege to be here discussing this topic with you, with the Policy Learning Network. Well, I work at University of Porto, as Arnold just mentioned, so I must say as a disclaimer that I don't work for the city of Amsterdam, which is the stakeholder who put this process in place. So I look into this from a research perspective. I got a nice grant from the Regional Studies Association to explore a bit further this kind of phenomena. So in 10 minutes, I'll try to give you a brief overview about the context, the setting of this instrument, and also to provide some reflections about whether I think it worked, what are the key challenges, what are the key issues. And then, of course, we can discuss it further. I think that's the most interesting part of the session. Well, I started looking into this. Actually, it was curious because when I started looking into Amsterdam, there was a certain discontent about the hackathon as a methodology to steer innovation and to solve city challenges. I would say that on the one hand, the city recognizes that this is an interesting setting to bring up a lot of ideas and energy from different types of innovators. But at the same time, there was a feeling that this is not as structured and as effective to lead to really impactful innovation to solve some kind of city issues. And actually, the program that I'm going to talk about, which is called Startup in Residence Amsterdam, in a way, it tries to bring the best of two worlds. You know, on the one hand, reaping energy from people that come from the bottom up and give new ideas to what could be important issues at the city level. And at the same time, it tries to provide some more structure and some more a thread line to make this process a bit more effective. So in a nutshell, what the city did was to come up with a few missions. Well, that's a bit what Arnold mentioned before. So the city brought forward a number of specific dimensions that they conceived as important innovation challenges at the level of the city. I'll talk a little bit about that in a while. So they framed it not as mini missions. Well, this is just already my expression, but they framed it as challenges, like challenges that the city want to get a solution or at least an idea about how to deal with that. One of the main interesting points here is that instead of running a hackathon, they put in place a formalized public procurement of innovation process. So it's legally a bit more structured. So it's not as easy for everybody to jump in, but the promise is that in the end, you have eventually a more structured innovation in the end. But the key idea here, again, as with most of these challenges, is not really to get a solution that exists off the shelf, that you can just go to a provider and get it, but it's about co-developing a solution for a specific problem. I think this is a very important part of this initiative. One important twist in this program is that it's very focused on a specific type of innovator. Well, for this specific example, the idea of the city was to mobilize startups. You know, they really target a specific audience. This has upsides and downsides, of course, we can discuss it later on. But the key idea was, of course, to get new perspectives about how can these specific missions be solved, but also because this specific audience was perceived as somehow a bit more risk-taking, a little bit less risk-adverse, and somehow it was perceived as having somehow more flexible business models that they could attune and relate and reorganize in terms of what the city was requiring. I can show in a few minutes to give you a glimpse about the process, because this was again a very sequential type of initiative. It was clearly going beyond the 2-day or 3-day settings with a lot of energy that we have in hackathons. So it involved like almost 6 months of maturation, and it all started with the municipality defining and formalizing which actually the missions are, which actually are the challenges here. And I'd say this opens up an important challenge, because you have to define this in a way that it's not very specific nor very broad, because if it's very specific, it's a bit going off the shelf and getting a solution that you already have a preconceived idea. But if you make it very broad, it also fails to give direction. So I think a key issue here was really to find the optimal range of the challenge to, on the one hand, to give direction, but not to bound the innovator in a specific direction. Of course, here, issues related with dialogue and really interacting with city partners to make sure that the missions really had this kind of feature was really fundamental in my perspective to kick off the initiative. Then after this, we have a process of startup selection. So the municipality with a group of stakeholders, they invite companies to solve specific missions. So each and every of these missions, they get a specific startup to reflect and think about what can be done about it. I would say that here a fundamental issue is to reduce the cognitive distance between the municipality and the startup. You know, these are, of course, very different worlds with very different mindsets. So I think the way that the municipality here, they invited startups was done in a very interesting way. Well, again, reducing all the legal burden and the you know, the kind of heavy feeling that you could have by entailing in the public procurement of innovation process. I think this was very, very important here. And of course, the idea is that the prototype that was proposed to the municipality, it had to be good, not only for the city itself, but it also had to be interesting from a startup perspective. So it should be a solution that it's not only to be sold to the city of Amsterdam, for example, but should be something that can be scaled up and sold to other parts of the world. So it's not something to be just for the city. So to say a critical issue in this stage, again, is to find the ideas which have this double condition. Or they can be an interesting solution for this concrete mission, which is very specific of the municipality, but at the same time, the startup can make something more out of that. And then we enter into what is the most interesting stage in this process, which is a 6-month period in which the startup sits within the municipality, interacts on a daily and weekly basis with the persons involved with the specific mission, because each and every of these missions, they have what they call a challenge owner. So it's the person who feels the pain and who raises the challenge. So there is very close interaction between these actors. You also have persons from the municipality which act as some kind of intermediaries and brokers between these constituencies in the process. You have mentors. So you see what they put together is a very specific and structured process under which you can not only come up with interesting ideas, but help you to really bring them a bit more developed and really prototype something that can be used in the end of the process. What I found very interesting in this setting is that over this period, you start to reframe ideas, to come up with new visions. So it's really a co-development and co-innovation process that takes place. What you also have here is an embedded training program. It's about training both for startups and for city officials to learn a bit more about these two different worlds, to learn a bit more about what does it entail to work with a startup, and for startups, what does it mean to work with the public sector? I think this is a fundamental part of the program. Then you get some seed funding. I think this is a very interesting twist in relation to hackathons, because usually in hackathons, you get the prize in the end or not. But what they do here is that they provide you some seed funding during the process. For example, if you need to develop some small infrastructure, or to buy some expertise, or to buy some sensors, for example, you get some seed resources to make this process going. And then, of course, during this process, and this is actually why most of the startups are interested in doing this, it's because you can access a strong user base, you can access contacts from people inside the municipality, you get the brand of working with the city of Amsterdam. So I would say that during this process, as a company, you are given all sorts of resources that really make your innovation process a bit more structured and somehow more promising to deliver what the mission is calling to. Well, these are just some examples, some illustrations of some of the types of innovations that came out of this challenge. Of course, this program ran for much more than one edition. It ran for 6 or 5 different rounds. So this is just an example of some of the solutions that came out of that. And I think we can discuss it later if you want. For time reasons, I will just go very fast through that. And I would like to conclude to call your attention to 5 issues that I found really, inspirational in this process, and helps us to move a bit beyond the pure hackathon. For example, one issue here is that what the city is doing is trying to really mobilize entrepreneurial forces in the city. So, of course, they are happy to get ideas from hackers and hobbyists, and I think this is what we get very much in hackathons. But here the idea is really to go one step forward and use the entrepreneurial ecosystem that you have in the city already operating. And I think it gives some additional power to this kind of initiative. A second issue has to do with the formal commitment. Well, here we have concrete challenge owners that are champions of the process. So they are involved to the full in the process. They want to see something solved, and they actually really co-innovate with the companies to a very large extent. This is, again, a bit different from the usual hackathon setting. On the third place, I would say that for each of these missions, this process focused on providing a very specific and purpose-driven ecosystem. So each of the missions have this kind of diamond that I showed you before, with mentors, challenge owners, startups, and brokers. And I would say this really helps to give a boost to the process. Fourth, I mentioned to you already this issue of seed funding. I think this is a very different feature in relation to many of these usual inducements prize, because you are giving resources during the process. As a public authority, you are facing some risk as well, because you are spending money into something that might not give rise to anything very useful in the end, but it's about innovation, so the risk is always inbuilt. And then it's about the systematic maturation. I think this is a key difference here, because you are giving room and giving space so that these ideas really have time to get experimented, to be tested. You can evaluate that in the end. And of course, this is the kind of process that you cannot put in place in a very fast, caffeine-driven two-day effort. So I'd say that these are 5 dimensions that I found really interesting in this specific case. And of course, I'm happy to discuss those further with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Luís. That was super interesting. And thanks for those 5 highlights at the end. And Marc, maybe you have some questions. I think you have your mic on.
Always. Thanks, Luís, for that. And also thanks to Sevdalina for her comments earlier on. 2 questions, and it's more about going into the detail. I was just interested to understand which city department takes the lead, because you're covering many different issues, and to the extent that one department oversees it, or do you cascade the methodology down and say, right, now get on with it? And that would be the first one. And then the challenge of identifying the startups, as you said, you've got to find the right level of startup that's not just a hobbyist, and finding ones that will become, reliable partners. And it's the same with any procurement process. But those are 2 sort of areas where I think it would be interesting. And then there's a question from Luís Carvalho in the chat we will come on to afterwards. So any views on those 2 points?
Yeah, thank you, Marc. Those are, of course, great questions. In the case of the city of Amsterdam, this was run by the chief technology officer. So there was this personality that was created in the city before. And what they did was creating a specific, a dedicated mission team. So they tasked a few persons within the municipality to champion this process. So they became called the SIRA team, Startup in Residence team. And these persons were in charge to knock each and every door within the municipality to try to collect missions. And this went beyond the municipality. They also involved, for example, the water agency, the energy company in the municipality. And their task in the beginning was precisely to fine-tune these missions, because you can imagine that many of them were very broad, some others are very narrow. So their challenge was actually to find challenge owners with an interest to work with startups, and to be able to formalize a relatively concrete mission. For example, I remember that the persons who really get committed with these challenges, they really have to commit to work intensively with the company. Like, it's not like you work with them for one day and then you meet 1 month afterwards. No, they really had to commit to have to go in a sequential way with them. And this team was acting as some sort of intermediary within the process. So they were the ones who were sitting in the meetings, like if the conversation was running into a standstill, or if some tensions were emerged, because many tensions, of course, emerged along the way. So they were acting as some kind of challenge brokers and keep the conversation flowing. So I would say that their challenge was really fundamental here. They were also involved, of course, in selecting the startups. This operated as an open call. So you have which challenge can you solve? So it was a bottom-up process to involve interesting startups. But then again, they were selected on the basis of these 2 dimensions, like whether the idea that you bring forward can be something that we see promised to solve a mission at the city level, and at the same time can be something that you can profit on as a startup, that you can sell elsewhere, that you can make something out of this. So I'd say these 2 issues were very fundamental in the process. I don't know if I answered your question, Marc.
Always parts of the answers are useful. The question that Luís Carvalho asked is, she was looking at the sort of whether there's a broader policy instrument that is overseeing the different challenges or hackathons. And you answered it in part by saying it's overseen by the CTO. So it's a sort of a technology, let's say, driven policy instrument. But if you've seen in the chat, do you want to add anything to what you've just said regarding Lucia's question?
I'm reading through the chat now.
Yeah, that's good.
Gender. Yeah.
it's more the last part of it. You know,
Yeah, I see it now. Well, they put this in place as with a public procurement of innovation instrument. So they were designing it from scratch at the city level. And of course, all sorts of legal challenges also came to the fore. I'm not the best person to discuss those because I didn't really get involved with the legal issues, but certainly they were in place. But what they put this as a bundle of challenges. So they had a specific budget under which they would support these different missions. And in that respect, they were, of course, keeping an oversight about what was going on in different project teams. But I think that, again, the interesting aspect of this initiative is the fact that you have a specific ecosystem dedicated to each and every mission. So I would say that you have the best of two worlds, because you have this specific ecosystem that works on a very concrete level to get things solved and to get a new product or service being created. And at the same time, you have people overseeing all the groups at the same time. So of course, you have all different sorts of steering committees and so on. So I'd say that the organizational structure was well conceived in that respect. When it comes to gender, Lucia, now that I think back, most of the people managing this process were actually women. So in that respect, from the managerial side, this gender issue was actually quite well covered. From the startup side, I cannot guarantee that, but I would say that I don't see that being a very key issue from the beginning. I might be wrong. Again, as a disclaimer, I didn't design the program myself. I was just looking into that, but I would say that it was balanced to some extent.
Okay, thanks. Luís, for general knowledge, the Interreg Europe community, we've got a number of public procurement initiatives, and on the 6th of June, we're going to have a focus on the PCP, so the pre-commercial procurement, which is part of the process that you've been describing, because you have a challenge and you're looking for solutions, and so you're pre-purchasing, and you summed it up nicely that the SMEs, the startups, can become SMEs if they sell their services. And I think of a good example where I think it's the Danish health sector. They managed to launch during COVID a robot that was capable of disinfecting very sensitive and complicated environments. And they went from selling 10 or 20 to having a massive order from the Commission of 300 units, and now they're a unicorn. So they went from a PCP type environment, selling a few machines and developing them with the health authority, to now selling unicorns. Means they have $1 billion turnover. So, and this is PCP. So 6th of June, if you look in your calendars, we'll be running a PCP workshop. So Luís, you and your Amsterdam and everyone else is more than welcome.
Thanks, Marc. Thank you so much, Luís, for your presentation. And now let's move on to Bulgaria. Sofia, Sevdalina, the floor is yours, and let's have a look at hackathon in Sofia with the INNOBRIDGE challenge. And the floor is yours, and you have 10 minutes as well.
Thank you. It's actually a lot of things are quite similar to what we've heard, but also there are some specifics from a city, or at least our city point of view. We are actually in a time when everyone's organizing hackathons and competitions, from Pope Francis to the American president to the entire European Commission to 80% of Forbes 500 companies have had hackathons last year. So most of the universities, a lot of non-governmental organizations, so regional authorities obviously also follow and try to use hackathons to solve their own issues and challenges. We've started with that. We have started with organizing hackathons probably 10 years ago. So why we started? There are a couple of functions that we have identified over the years that help us as municipality to set up this type of and use this type of instrument. And they're not arranged in any specific order, but one of them is that actually they help us with the agenda setting, identifying an issue and putting it out there for solutions, crowd-funded solutions, basically sets it very high up in the agenda of the public authority. So that's one of the important aspects why we use this. Another one that's probably the most obvious is, of course, that they create an avenue for experimenting ideas and exploring opportunities. We, for example, wanted to have an automated technology to count bicycles in Sofia, but we had no idea which one to choose. Do we want to have a CCTV in camera? Do we want to have another option? How would they behave depending on climate, snow, heat, but also GDPR and privacy? So when you're not sure about it, that's also a good way to go forward. Moreover, it also contributes to the other objective and the other benefit, which is really bridging this gap between the public authorities and stakeholders and citizens, because as a start, as a minimum, you basically tell your citizens their challenges and we don't know what is the right approach. So help us in this. Let's do it together and let's see what works for all. But it's not just this, it's also cooperating, like co-creation and putting citizens at the center, but also using open data, because this also builds a culture of using public data for these purposes of creating solutions jointly. One of the very important aspects is that this type of open competitions, they also create and foster and embed deeply the culture of innovation. This is particularly important in terms of capacity of civil servants, because if they don't understand innovation, they will not implement it in their day-to-day life. So there is an educational component to practically everyone. I mean, for us, it's important for public servants, but it's also quite important for the public in general. Because we have just introduced, for example, one innovative public service in Sofia, public transport on demand. And one of the challenges that we were facing when we were doing it was also somehow convincing the citizens that their argument, we've always had transport like this, and why do we need a new type of transport? I mean, this also the whole idea that we're living in a world that changes, and even most conservative systems are also subject to some adaptation and change is important. And last but not least, competitions, hackathons, they create excitement and significant public and media interest, dramatically bigger than any public procurement, unless, of course, it's for billions and billions. But we as cities do not have public procurement of that range. So how it works? It really depends on the type of competition that you do. I've given here an example related to urban mobility, and one specific aspect, challenge about urban mobility, and this is what we call parasite traffic, parking related traffic, which is basically you move around and drive around trying to find a parking spot. Okay, parking is paid, but while you're driving around the city center to find a parking space, actually you create a lot of traffic, pollution, etc. So provide your resources, all parking related data, fines, spots, availability, air quality sensors data, etc. Everything, the more you provide, the better. And unlike our colleagues in Amsterdam, we're looking for projects or prototypes that would put eventually a new or improved service on the market, introduce some new commercial process or service that could be directly tested locally in Sofia. But this I mean, we are very much aware that this is a very initial stage, so that this is a competition that could only take us to a potential solution, but this is the beginning of a process. So we're not looking for necessarily for something that is viable for a startup, but is viable for a solution that is worth testing in Sofia. As for prices, we have discovered that financial prices attract participants. When you survey some participants and teams, they never say that this is their motivation. Their top one motivation is going to be, I have passion for this, I want to increase my professionalism, I want to do networking, etc. But just our experience shows that when we have attractive financial prices, the number of participating teams is dramatically higher. But this is not all. So we provide some financial incentives, but more importantly, what we provide is that the winning several projects or ideas that then included in our program Municipal Sandbox, where they spent approximately 6 months being further developed with mentors, particularly from the city, and also being tested as a demo site in Sofia. Plus, we also provide communication support. At present, we have 2 hackathons running. You can see the link over there for one of them, which is actually on biodiversity. For this one, we work with Europeana, and they specially curated for us enormous data sets with photos from Sofia and the region for a period of over 100 years. So we're using this visual data sets to trigger, to inspire, to also visualize complex processes. We also have another one, sorry. We also have a civic hackathon on hate speech, also going on at the moment. Very quickly, some pros and cons. Not everything that we identify as a winning project actually reaches market readiness level. There's a lot of failure as well. So we end up with some minimum viable products, but not all of them manage to mature at all. So there is a risk in that we should be all honest about. Organizing a hackathon actually requires significant resources. If you don't organize it well, it's going to be a waste of resources and waste of time. And our experience with over 10 years of organizing hackathons show that teams tend to lack diversity. I mean, look at the pictures. These are great guys. Normally, they're very young. They're technically savvy. Great qualities, but very rarely you'll see elderly people among them. Very rarely you can see people with disabilities, migrants, etc. So from a city point of view, you have to be really mindful to provide contextual information and make sure that these viable products are actually tested against the background of society at large. However, there are also a lot of pros, and some of them are that relatively easy. You can identify some viable ideas that actually require short research cycles, which means that relatively quickly you could go to testing and demo sites. Another wonderful thing is that they actually demonstrate that good ideas can come from anywhere, and not least, events like this, they actually strengthen the ecosystem because they tend to bring people together. They tend to set the agenda together. There's a lot of mentoring, socializing, lots of partnerships. So all these really helps us build, strengthen the ecosystem and include and take the rightful place in it for local and regional authorities. And a couple of lessons learned for others that we've learned, most of them the hard way. So before they became lessons learned, it means they were mistakes. These are not all the mistakes we've made. One is know where to find the participants. Who are the participants you expect, and know where to find them, because they will not just follow the website of the municipality or your social media channels. So you have to really know who you want to attract and where to find them. A couple of things about the challenges themselves. Don't make the challenges super difficult, because people will not show up, but don't make them too vague either, because it's a competition. So you have to be fair in judging and in rewarding. Don't make too numerous challenges, because you get lost. And then again, it's very difficult when you're giving prizes to really defend the fairness of it. We've learned also the hard way how to frame a challenge. And I told you about the one that is currently going about biodiversity. So we started with the idea that we will go for something along the lines of preserving biodiversity, but we ended up with something that's called Stop Biocide. And biocide is a non-existent word. It's a coined word, but it's meant to remind you of genocide, of mass killing of groups. So why is that? Because people participate in these competitions because they take a lot of their private time, a lot of their professional time to come and participate there. And that particularly their leading motivation is their passion for something. And they're most passionate when they see that something is at risk, that there is a threat. I don't mean to say that every hackathon should be like a threat, but it really attracts, I mean, if you could show this angle that there is an urgent need to solve something, that there is an acute necessity and that there is a risk, even better. And actually, to be honest, most of the time, this is the case. But it takes some practice to really create the right prompts. Provide the right contextual knowledge, guidance, and mentorship. So if you give the wrong instructions, if you don't provide the right data and resources and knowledge, you'll get up somewhere else. And we try not just to stimulate startups and patents, we try to also particularly solve local problems. So when people ask you about data or some specific questions, you'd better have the right people to give the right answers, which also means a support team of knowledgeable and committed people. Have appealing prizes and rewards, and I said a couple of words about that, but also rewards not only for the winners. Everyone wants to win, so you cannot reward everyone that participates in a hackathon, but what is there for them? I mean, before we get to the hackathon, this is unless it's going to be your only hackathon ever, then if you plan to use this instrument regularly, you have to be able to respond to the question, so what is there for every participant? And that's how you work with partners and with sponsors, and just figure out that what is this that everyone is taking as a takeaway after this hackathon, so they come back, so they spread the word for your next hackathon. Be very mindful of intellectual property rights and also of the instruments used. You have probably heard, you have probably read that around the world, people are increasingly talking about hackathons in negative terms as exploitation and free work, particularly on the side of corporations. As regional and local authorities, we cannot allow to be put in the same category. So don't force participants to work only with specific digital or other tools. Don't and be very, very mindful of IPR. This is their property. You provide the platform, you're the city, you're the citizens, but at the end of the day, this is their product and you're happy to use it. And there should be fairness in that. And this should be said and from the very start. And one final thing at this point, do regular public reporting about the outcomes of your hackathons. People will stop coming, they will stop believing you unless you can show a good record of, after so many hackathons, what actually appeared in the city, what happened, why do you do it? So I'm also happy that we could also report that we have the first municipal app that rewards good deeds. And we have a system for active transport that encourages active transport. And we have the first automated translation from the sign language into Bulgarian and vice versa that is used by public authorities, and a number of other things that actually are in the city and help us. And probably just one final thing. We say hackathon, I say hackathons, but actually I mean a variety of genres, because it could be datathons, working with data. It could be visitons, which has nothing to do with Visa card. It actually shows visualization of complex processes. We also had makeathons, where we worked with families of people with disabilities, trying to physically make things that would make their life easier, and then see how those prototypes could actually fit into something bigger. So this is when I say hackathons, it's actually a synonym of creative processes and formats that could address different aspects of solutions that are important to your city. And I'll stop here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sevdalina. That was super, super interesting. And I had one question. I mean, usually one big advantage of those hackathons and challenge prizes, right, is to attract a broad range of solvers. I mean, compare if you look at investment, public procurement, there is a broader range, but you still like mentioned this lack of diversity. And I was wondering, have you tried, a specific challenge that attracts, broader range of people? Have you tried to do that to attract this broad range of solvers?
We have, we're also learning, but my point is it's a conscious effort that should go throughout your organizing process. So if you see that the people that are signing up as teams are not diverse enough, at least in what you can gather from the initial knowledge and before meeting them, then you substitute this with mentors. So you add mentors. If this also is not sufficient, then you supply contextual information and data, and then you encourage teams during developing their project to really consider that as well. You also put it as one of the criteria for receiving an award, because as a city, you absolutely have the responsibility to be socially fair and to have just transition, not just digital transition or green transition. So we want to really make this visible with the mentors, with the jury. And at the end of the day, the conditions we try to create for testing it, like a demo in real environment, we also try to be to reflect the diversity of our society as well. So it's a conscious effort. That's my point. I mean, you have to try at every stage of it. And also, it's an important element of public reporting afterwards, because we don't want to increase the gap between the early adopters and some that might be left behind.
Super interesting. Thanks, Sevdalina. Marc, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Sevdalina. Your last slide, lessons learned, I think, answered all my questions. So I thought, well, what am I going to ask now?
Oh, I have more mistakes. So
that's it. I mean, I can remember you were very proactive in saying you learn by your mistakes, which is, I think, having this sort of approach. The question, just from a practical sense, the timeline for an idea to appear in your pipeline of hackathons, because one of the things I think we all take on board is that hackathons, competitions, can actually shorten the policy making / implementation. And the question is, does it, if people, are bombarding you with challenge requests, are they in a sort of pipeline of, well, you'll be selected for 2024 first quarter, you're in plan for 25, then it's no longer that reactiveness. So what's your sort of process?
We actually have lots of competitions. We use this instrument a lot. And there, apart from the reasons that I said, one other reason is that we are unfortunately quite low in terms of patents. So this is also part of the confidence building and trust building, because people do develop their innovations locally, but they prefer to register them elsewhere. So this is one of the reasons why we want to keep the process going throughout all year round. How we do this, it's not the same group of people that organizes all hackathons, so it's not possible. So different departments have their own pipeline and their own organization. However, this all gets under the one head, and this is the digitalization department. So no matter what type of competitions you do, they have to somehow fit, and they have to be on board, because they're the ones that are managing the policy, the municipal sandboxing. So they are actually the ones that provide the second phase of after the competition. So this allows us to really work on a variety of issues at the same time. As I said, currently we have these two going on. This is only my organization is doing this this month. So, and this is not our core line of work. But once you learn how to do this instrument, it gets easier with the experience, and then people trust you more. They know what to expect from you. Which means this is what I meant by creating and strengthening the ecosystem. You become a player in this ecosystem, and somehow really well connected, and people watch what you're going to announce.
Yeah, I mean, you used a good word there, trust, and I think it follows on the debate that Lucia Seal started with Luís about, are there's gender in the implementation, and you showed the picture and said, well, there's no old people, and there's no, the different categories. And I think in Interreg Europe, we've got some experience. There's a project called Femina, where we've been looking at sort of the industry 4.0 from that. Lucia Seal mentioned a project, you'll see it in the chat, everyone, Penelope, and there's another one on European Horizon funding called Jill, which is run by the European Network of Living Labs. So again, we can see how these different policy tools can also trigger another, let's say inequality. You mentioned it, diversity. So I think also helps, but I'm talking to the policymakers who are in attendance. You can use one tool and you can tick off a few other boxes in terms of your municipality or your regional priorities.
Oh, absolutely. This is probably one of our internal rules and procedures. A hackathon can only be launched if it's good for at least 2 municipal strategic objectives. So even though it has specific challenges, again, it has to be good for, let's say, urban mobility and air quality, or gender equality, or age-friendly cities, plus biodiversity, or, I mean, you have to figure out at least 2, because life is cross-cutting. Life is so interconnected. So our challenges cannot be very, very, very much put in boxes and independent.
We all know that if it takes more than 5 minutes to find a car park space, your stress level goes up. So well-being, the people in Sofia must be feeling a lot better with their parking app.
There's always room for improvement, but...
All right. Thanks so much, Sevdalina, for your presentation. Thanks, Marc. And now we move on to the Basque country, San Sebastian, and the Donostia Innovation Challenge. So Aritz, the floor is yours, and you have 10 minutes as well for your presentation.
Sharing the screen. There we go. Can you hear me properly?
We can hear you properly and see the presentation, so all good.
Okay, so as you have said, what I'm gonna introduce is Donostia Innovation Challenge. It's an educational program we have, but first of all, I'm gonna introduce ourselves just to make you know what we do and why we promote this kind of programs. So Fomento San Sebastián is the local economic development agency. It was created in 1902. And right now, what we want to achieve is to become a leading agent in the promotion of innovation in the city. So in order to do so, what we do is to promote the development of innovative projects that boost the city's economy and employment, always with a focus on people and through a collaborative model. So there, what you can see is part of our strategic plan, and it's our 5th objective, and this is related to talent. We want to promote projects for professional development of young people in the city, and in order to do so, one of the sub-objectives is the development of innovation-related skills. Okay, so taking all that I've said into consideration, what we did in 2017 was to create Donostia Innovation Campus. This is a space in which we meet with educational centers and also innovative agents, research centers, and companies from our local ecosystem, just to create different programs and initiatives to achieve these objectives you can see. First of all, the already mentioned development of innovation-related skills. Also, we try to strengthen collaboration with educational centers. We try to raise the awareness among young people about the innovation ecosystem we have in the city, and also to bridge the gap between young talent and the skills required in the labor market. So, and the last one, but not the least, is that we believe that those young people we start working with in early stages are the ones that are going to be defining the future of the city. So taking this into consideration, what we do is to create, in collaboration with these agents, some programs, initiatives to work on this subject. So Donostia Innovation Challenge is the main program inside this campus, this space. We started with it in 2017, and it's a challenge-based program that aims to train the already mentioned skills, innovation skills. The program is developed in collaboration with educational centers and also agents from the innovation ecosystem. This means that the students start working on a challenge, and through the whole process, the agents, the research and development centers, and also innovative companies are helping them, not only getting them familiar to the technology they are using in the project, but also giving them some advices, evaluating their projects, and also defining and deciding which ones are the best ones. It takes around 5 months of work, and the most important thing, or the main thing, is that we work with the whole city value chain: the students, the educational centers, local technological companies, and also research and development centers. So basically what the students have to do is, first of all, identify a problem in the city. They have complete freedom to do so. They can look in the neighborhood, in their school. At the end, they have to identify a problem. And then they are going to start working on a solution. The only rule they have to follow is that solution they develop have to integrate one of those disruptive technologies. So once they have decided what challenge they want to go work with and the technology they are going to use, they have to develop a business idea that gives solution to that problem they have previously identified. These are some of the, as mentioned, one of the most important things is that we work with really closely through the whole program with different research and development agency centers and also local companies. And they are the ones really used to work with this technology in the day-to-day life. So what I said before, what they do is not only take part in the evaluation or giving advices, but also helping the students to understand what the technologies are about and how they can apply them in their projects. I haven't mentioned, but when I speak about the educational centers in this program, we work with high schools, but also with with universities and vocational centers. So students are really, really different ones from each other. The knowledge they have is really different. So it's the role of these agents is really important because they are the ones that are going to make those students have a great experience through the whole process. This is just a small slide with a methodology and the roadmap they follow. At the end, what we do is they have sessions on business management, sessions for getting familiarized with the technology, and also sessions about design and design thinking that are focused on helping them to identify that problem and start working on their solution. So also, since the first day till the last day, the students have a mentor that is going to be helping them. It's going to be in direct contact with them, so as to check that everything is working as expected, to see if they have any issue and try to look for a solution while the program is going on. And at the end of this process, what we do is a huge event, getting together all the students that have taken part. They present their ideas. There's like a kind of competition, which is which one is the best one, and we get prizes not only for the winners but also for the ones that have been working in the best way during the whole process. So probably, despite having some prizes, I think that the most important thing for students is that they feel they are developing something that it's useful for the city, and also they get in touch with local agents that if it's not through this kind of initiative, they will not meet and have access to them. No. So this is some numbers just to summarize what and just to see what's the scale of this program. For example, since it started in 2017, it's been like over 2,300 students taking part in the program. We have worked with more than 25 educational centers, as said before, not only high schools, but also vocational centers and universities. In total, there's been more than 25 local agents involved in mentoring the students in the field of the technology, also giving them advices and evaluating those projects they do. And we have during the last years, because of the pandemic, we tried to create also a platform in which we have you're able to work on this kind of project, but also we use it as a place to give them materials through that can be useful since the beginning of the program till the end. So in the last year, for example, it was 443 students, 11 educational centers, 13 agents from the local innovation ecosystem. And in total, there were more than 70 projects presented and designed by the students. And something that was really, really cool, just to enrich that technological experience and to make them know better the ecosystem, we organized a showroom with not only those agents involved in the program, but also with more companies and more research and development centers, in which the students were able not only to get in touch with to know the technology, but to play with it in a more interactive and ludical way. And last but not least, I think it's a kind of from the last year, another thing that should be mentioned, that the initiative itself was prized with an award in the Eurocities Awards. So basically, that's the thing I wanted to present. Just I know it's kind of different to the other examples we had previously, but probably you can take some ideas from this project and implement it in other programs, in other initiatives, and in different aspects of your day-to-day life. So thank you, and if you have any questions, you can.
Thanks so much, Aritz. That was a very interesting initiative, and also a very interesting initiative to understand how to promote, this kind of innovation culture, entrepreneurship culture among students as well. Marc, before we move on to structured discussion, any question for Aritz?
Yeah,
Aritz?
thanks. I'd echo what Arnaud just said about the sort of high school dimension. I think and that leads to my first question. The notion of talent attraction and talent retention is on every company's lips at the moment. We find staff, we have to keep them, and to what extent do you find companies using this as a future talent pool, looking at this made in San Sebastian schools and partnering up with you and maybe the schools?
Okay, yeah, it's the things that I said before, this when you work with high schools and schools, it's kind of difficult to measure the impact because it's a long-term thing. You're trying to ensure that talent you are helping to develop to stay in the city, but in general terms, it's really positive because we strongly believe, and companies and agents taking part, they really believe that the first step for retaining and getting that talent into the city is making them know that despite not being the biggest city in the world, of course we are a medium-sized one, they have plenty of opportunities, that there's a really strong innovation ecosystem in the city, and that despite that there are many and plenty opportunities for them. So in general terms, the companies and agents are really into this kind of initiatives.
Okay. And well, the next questions are more for the panel, so we can take those more generally. Arnaud.
Yeah, so we can move on to our structured discussion with all of our speakers. And I've got a question for all of you. I mean, we learn a lot, and we learn a lot about success stories, and it seems like an easy and smooth process to design such and implement such hackathons and prizes and challenge prizes. But Sevdalina, you mentioned mistakes, and and that's always important to learn from failures and mistakes. So maybe you can tell us, what mistakes have you made during this design and implementation of hackathon? And I will ask other speakers as well to tell us about the main mistakes they made during this implementation and design.
I wish I could say that we've made all the mistakes, but I'm sure that we'll make more in the future. So, some we've probably learned how to avoid by now, but most of the lessons learned indeed were mistakes. So we have made mistakes with somehow believing that with a few interviews in mainstream media and probably publications here and there, we will attract the right set of people to form teams and compete, and that was difficult. We have also made mistakes with prices. We have made mistakes with expectations for probably one of the ones that I haven't mentioned in the list of lessons learned is that we've made also mistakes attracting sponsors and partners. Because sometimes companies, and this is linked to the previous question that Marc you asked, Aritz, we have made a mistake that we have promised a company that if they sponsor the hackathon, that could actually be a good recruitment opportunity for them. And hackathons are not a recruitment opportunity. I mean, of course, here and there you can attract someone or a couple of people, but people do not come to hackathons with the expectation and the readiness to change their place of their employment or to look for new employers. They come with different expectations. So again, it's possible to recruit people, but this cannot be the first objective. However, the question about retaining and attracting talent is much bigger than recruitment. So they do serve their very good purpose in terms of talent in general, like at city level or ecosystem level, but not necessarily recruitment for a particular company. We've made, I don't know, we've made mistakes with timing. It took us and every time you have to really check when you're organizing a hackathon, what timing serves people better? Is it the weekend? Is it the weekdays? I mean, again, it really depends on the group of people that you're attracting. Who do you want there? But it's not so dramatic. I just learn from your mistakes, turn it into a learning opportunity, and be honest about them. And we're all in the same boat here. So just talk to people and say, sorry, I did it not the best way this time, but we'll try to do it better next time. And people are not that unforgetting. I mean, they're just and unforgivable. The mistakes are not so unforgivable. Just this is part of the learning, the learning attitude. If you could somehow convey that, I think this will open you a lot of doors.
Yes, thanks, Sevdalina, for being open and sharing these mistakes. And what about in Amsterdam, Luís? What were the main mistakes made? Do you have an idea about them?
Yeah, well, for me, it's always difficult to discuss that because I was not in charge of designing the program. So it's a bit awkward to pinpoint the issues that go wrong. But maybe I can say a few words about this issue of failure and tension that we always find in this context. I think we have to assume that there is failure there. We have to assume that tensions will occur. So I think in some of the examples that I studied more closely, actually the most interesting ideas resulted from tensions, from things that were going wrong in discussions, from startups and city officials colliding in different visions. And what I found interesting in this configuration is that the way this initiative is designed, it assumes that failure will exist. It will assume that tension will take place between the actors involved, but it has some kind of inbuilt program to keep the conversations flowing and to make sure that you don't reach a standstill and that you can still to get the failures back into your program. I think that's a very interesting feature in this specific example. Like many of those missions that I mentioned to you, some of them, they give rise to nice solutions that are still in place today in the city that are used on a daily basis. So they're really making roads into solving the challenge they were planned to solve. But many of them failed, or many of them in the end of the 6 months process, they just collapsed and they were completely abandoned. So it is also this notion of risk that we have to assume. We know that many things will not work. At the same time, this public procurement of innovation has an interesting feature because when you reach the end of the 6 months, you don't have to bite right away. So you can give the startup up to 2 more years to develop the innovation further. So it might not work now, but it might work in 2 years' time and you still have a buying option. So I'll say that all these features really make it more realistic, like don't assuming that everything will go very smoothly and in an excellent way, but assuming that many stuff will fail, and we see this happening all the time. I think we have really to assume that when you raise this kind of challenges, a lot of stuff will simply not work. Then of course we can discuss what we do with the lessons, what we do with learning inside the public organizations. But I think it's part of the deal we are dealing with.
True. Thanks, Luís. And what about Donostia Innovation Challenge, Aritz? Any mistakes to share?
Just before you answer, Aritz, just colleagues, Luís and Sevdalina, you've got some questions in the chat, so you can tap away while the rest of us talk. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt, Aritz.
Okay, in our case, same happens to me. I wasn't there when the program itself was designed, but what I've seen is how it has changed during the last years. One thing that I think it's been a huge change and really good for the program is that at first we started working with already given challenges to the students. We defined the challenge they were going to work on. And that happened that with that, some students were really into it, but other ones weren't that interested into working on it. So with this approach of finding your own issue and finding your own problem in the city, it makes you really feel that the project is yours and be really motivated to continue working on it. At the end, it's 5 months of work, but you're not just working on this. They are going to their regular lessons, and for them can be really hard to keep motivated through the time. So I guess that that was a good implementation, and that probably something we have learned through the time.
Thanks, Aritz. Empowering people, truly important. Marc, questions?
Yeah, I had two questions and just decided which one to ask first. But all of you have mentioned the importance, Luís and Sevdalina in particular, the sort of the technology, whether it's the CTO, whether it's the digital transition department, but that sort of technology driver. And question I had is there a sort of regular players within your innovation ecosystems that you would recommend others make sure they associate to facilitate different aspects? I mean, there's the municipality management dimension, and we're having a strong digital CTO approach. But are there any other sort of facilitators that you would regularly turn to, and if you were walking to another city and say, okay, these are the people you need to put around the table to make these successful? Who wants to start? Luís, you've got your microphone open.
Okay, so since it's open, I'll take the lead. Yeah, I think in the specific case of Amsterdam, they worked from the beginning with these 4 types of actors. The startup, like leading the idea, championing a specific solution. Then the challenge owner, it's of course fundamental in the process, because it's the one who is going to expose and challenge and interact closely with the startup to check whether the solution can be solved in that way or not. Then there is the person I mentioned to you, and you mentioned just now, like the CTO and the CTO team and so on. But then what I found very clever in this scheme is that they involved since the beginning mentors. And you mentioned that already in the case of Sofia. And I think here this actor was very important, because they were the ones that could, in a way, check or suggest or lead the innovator to think a bit broader. Because the risk that we see in these initiatives is that you tend to come up with a solution that works for context A, or for Amsterdam, or for Sofia, or San Sebastian, and then it's always rather hard to scale up and make more out of that. So to say that having these voices in the ecosystem really helps to make a bit more out of that and make the solutions a bit more operable in the end of the day. But on the top of that, I think in the case of Sofia, also mentioned this notion of sandbox. Like in the case of Amsterdam, like all the 6 months is a whole 6 months sandbox. Like it's about interacting with people that feels the pains, that have the challenge, that can be users, that can be testers. So then during the 6 months, this is really the stage in which the ecosystem really broadens up to the maximum extent that it's necessary. So to say that it's always a challenge of combining stages in which you have a more smaller number of actors up to the moment when you really get on board everybody that you need to. So I think that's obviously very, very fundamental.
Good answer, thanks. Sevdalina, your...
I have a little to add. Probably if we put things like in some sort of order, I would always try to recommend to approach competitions, challenges, hackathons from at least 3 points of view, like green, because we're into a green transition. So what's the relation to sustainability, and this brings to the table a respective group of people. And then digital by default, digital transition, who are these people that should be around the table, and then just or fair. So because it's going to be a just transition. So who are these people that will actually bring this social and justice component in every city? But apart from that, I would always recommend every now and then to have outsiders, and probably you could rotate them and just invite random people. Random times. We were stuck once. We were really stuck once with a challenge. No, not with a challenge. Okay, let me put it this way. We were really stuck how to announce hackathons at one point. Because as we were discussing now, there's a lot of unpredictability. There's a lot of things like, how do we spend public money on something that's so not sure? If it all fails, what will happen? How do we communicate this? And then we started sort of communicating that it's a pilot, that we will try to do something, experiment, blah, blah, blah. And it didn't sell. It just didn't sell. And then we didn't know what to do. We absolutely didn't know what to do. And then we invited a philosopher by education and by career. And we said, okay, how does this sound from your point of view? I mean, it nothing to do with this. It's all nothing. And then basically we came up with a different set of eyes, with a brand new way of communicating. Basically, what this person told us is, have you ever heard a commercial company, a big commercial company, to launch on the market something like a new phone, for example, and say, hey, we're piloting a new phone, let's see if the citizens like it or not, and then maybe we'll sell it or not, but why don't you buy it and see whether it's okay for you or not? I mean, they always tell you this is the best phone ever.
Yeah.
You've always dreamt of having this phone. And so we completely took out all the pilots, experimenting, testing, blah, 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 from the discourse. And so again, this is to cut the long story short.
Sell it.
Get whoever needs to be there around the table, but also keep it open. I mean, I know that not everyone can be there on stage, but then just keep the door open and invite different people, because really innovation can come from anywhere. That's not just a slogan. This is the reality, and this is the best of this reality.
No, I like that. You're right. It's about, packaging it in, selling it, whatever word the philosopher gave you, but the outsider perspective was interesting. So,
maybe I can just stress, Marc, because also in the case of Amsterdam, this communication issue was very, very fundamental, like reducing the cognitive distance between innovators and civil officers. It was really fundamental from day one. And then again, because we have in this program, we had 6 months to experiment and to really work together. There was an inbuilt training program within the scheme. Like if you are participating in such a scheme, if you are the startup, you need to get training sessions and to understand how the public sector works. And if you are the challenge owner from the public sector, you have to learn how startups work. So it's kind of mandatory sessions in which you try again to reduce these communication barriers between the two segments in place.
Yeah, thanks. Aritz, were there any sort of go-to actors? I mean, in the sense you've run it for a number of years, so you've been able to follow adapting to the needs. Are there actors that you didn't think you needed, and now you have them every time?
At the end, we really, since the beginning of the challenge, we really thought that it has some pillars too, and it has to be structured over those pillars. One is collaboration, the other one is technology, but also business management and soft skills. So since the first moment, I think there was a really good work of identifying which actors you need to sustain those pillars in the program, and it's been really easy. The first time when they first joined the program, different agents, different education centers, they really had a good experience, and the thing is that every year they ask to take part, and for us there's no such a need of communication. It's really easy, because the experience they had previously, it's good, and they see that things are being improved, that there are new changes coming into the program, but still the basis of the program is the same now. So in that sense, we are kind of lucky.
Okay. Well, I think all three of your answers have been very helpful for the audience, because I can imagine some people here are looking at a sort of hackathon and say, well, if I have to start this on next Monday, who do I invite? Who are the people? And they've got a long list now, and they can adapt it to their ecosystem, whether you're in Thessaloniki or in Amsterdam or Sofia or San Sebastian. So Arnault, I'm seeing
Marc,
TikTok time for you to wrap up.
Exactly, it's time to close. Thanks so much to our speakers, Luís, Sevdalina, and Aritz. Was great having you with us this afternoon. Great presentations. Keep up the good work. Thanks so much to participants and to be so engaged, asking questions in the chat and so on. So thank you so much for being here. As follow-up, we will write a very short follow-up article on this webinar and the main insights. And of course, please register to our next webinar, which is going to be on pre-commercial public procurement, and it's going to be on the 6th of June. So stay tuned for this next webinar. Thanks so much, and see you soon. Until next time.
A little survey will come up now for you to answer before you disappear.
Exactly. Thanks so much. Bye-bye to everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.